The night before her wedding, Zawadi couldn't sleep. Her heart was full of nerves and dreams. She stepped outside for some air, but what she heard changed everything. Her fiancé was on the phone, laughing softly, and saying words that broke her. "You're the one I truly want, not her," he said. He wasn't talking to a stranger. He was talking to her own sister, Nia. Zawadi froze. Her world spun. She wanted to believe she misheard, but deep down, she knew the truth. The next morning, her wedding dress hung untouched. Guests waited. Her parents paced. But the groom? He never showed up. Hours later, Zawadi's phone lit up with messages. Pictures were everywhere, of him at the airport, down on one knee, proposing. Not to Zawadi, but to Nia. Her own sister smiled in the photos, holding the ring that was meant for her. Zawadi didn't cry right away. She didn't scream. She just stood there, watching her fairy tale burn to ash. The people she trusted most had betrayed her in the cruelest way. Everyone was talking. The scandal spread like wildfire. But no one asked how Zawadi felt. No one saw the quiet pain in her eyes. In one night, she lost her future, her love, and her sister. All she had left was silence, and the first spark of a decision that would change her life forever. Zawadi sat in her room, still wearing the clothes from the day before. Her wedding dress was folded in a box, untouched, like a cruel joke. The house was quiet, but inside her heart, everything screamed. Her phone buzzed again, more photos, more gossip, more whispers. Everyone was talking about what happened, but no one was truly talking to her. Her sister Nia didn't say sorry. Her ex-fiancé didn't explain. And the people who were supposed to protect her, her own parents, just told her to let it go. "It's just a small scandal," they said. "Don't make it worse." Zawadi looked at them, shocked. Small scandal? Her heart had been torn out. Her future was gone. And all they could say was, "At least he stayed in the family." That one sentence broke her more than anything else. Her parents didn't see the pain in her eyes. They didn't see how her hands shook when she tried to hold a glass of water. To them, the wedding was cancelled, yes, but life must go on. To Zawadi, everything had stopped. She tried to eat, but every bite tasted like betrayal. She tried to sleep, but the moment she closed her eyes, she saw Nia in that airport photo, smiling like nothing was wrong. It felt like her entire life had been erased overnight. No one defended her. No one stood by her. She was invisible in her own home, a ghost walking through rooms filled with shame. But deep inside, something started to shift. A small voice whispered, "You don't belong here anymore." This pain was not hers to carry. She didn't ruin anything, they did. And yet, she was the one expected to stay quiet, to smile, to pretend like nothing had happened. Why should she? One night, after another long dinner of silence and fake smiles, Zawadi went into her room, packed a small suitcase with a few clothes, some savings she had hidden away, and one old photo of herself as a little girl, smiling, hopeful, full of dreams. She looked at that photo and promised that girl something. "I will not let this be the end of my story." She left a note on her bed. Just a few simple words, "Don't worry. I'm not running from shame. I'm walking toward my peace." And before the sun rose, Zawadi stepped out of that house, wearing a plain dress and carrying nothing but her bag and her broken heart. She didn't know exactly where she was going. She didn't have a plan. But for the first time in days, she felt free. The air outside was cold, but it woke her up. The sky above her was still dark, but it didn't scare her. Something in her had changed. She had been humiliated, betrayed, erased, yes. But not broken. Not finished. Zawadi walked away from the house that had once been her world, and she never looked back. Zawadi arrived in Daruka city with just one small suitcase and a tired heart. She didn't know anyone there, and she had no big plans. She just needed to start over, far away from the pain, the shame, and the whispers. Her first few weeks were the hardest. She found a small cafe job, cleaning tables and serving tea with a fake smile. At night, she went back to her shared room in a noisy apartment with strangers who barely noticed her. She cried quietly into her pillow so no one would hear. Some nights she didn't cry, she just stared at the ceiling, wondering if her life would ever feel like hers again. Days passed slowly. The city was loud, busy, and full of people who looked like they knew where they were going. Zawadi felt invisible. Forgotten. She was doing her best to survive, but inside, she felt like she was still breaking. Still lost. Until one morning at the cafe, everything changed. It was a cold, cloudy day. The cafe was full, and the staff was rushing. Zawadi was behind the counter when a man walked in alone and quietly took a seat in the corner. He looked calm, almost too calm for the chaos around him. A few minutes later, some angry customers began shouting at him, accusing him of taking their table. The man didn't speak, didn't argue, he just sat there quietly, letting the insults rain down. Something in Zawadi snapped. She couldn't stay silent. She walked straight over, stood between the man and the angry voices, and said, "He didn't do anything wrong. Please calm down, we can find you another table." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. The crowd grumbled and moved away. The man looked up at her and gave the smallest smile. "Thank you," he said softly. Zawadi didn't think much of it. To her, he was just another quiet customer who needed kindness. But the next day, he came back. He ordered tea and asked how her day was going. The day after that, he came again. And again. Slowly, they began to talk. Just short conversations, nothing deep. But Zawadi noticed how his eyes really listened when she spoke, how he smiled without pretending, how he never asked her past, but always noticed her mood. Weeks later, her manager pulled her aside and whispered, "Do you know who that man is? That's Idris Okonjo. One of the richest men in Africa. Owns half the tech companies in this city. But no one ever sees him in public." Zawadi was shocked. That quiet man in the corner, a billionaire? She couldn't believe it. But even after knowing, she treated him the same. She didn't care about his money. She just liked the peace he brought into her noisy world. And slowly, without even realizing it, her life began to change. She still lived in that small room, still worked long hours, but now, she smiled more. Laughed a little. Looked forward to mornings. Because somewhere between heartbreak and healing, something new had begun. Something gentle. Something real. Something Zawadi never saw coming. Idris couldn't stop thinking about her. The way Zawadi stood up for him that day, so calm, so fearless, it stayed in his mind long after he left the cafe. She wasn't loud or dramatic. She didn't try to show off or impress anyone. But there was something powerful in her presence. Something soft yet strong. So, he came back the next day. And then again the day after that. Always sitting in the same corner, always watching her with quiet interest, always offering a kind smile when their eyes met. At first, Zawadi thought it was just a coincidence. Then she realized, he was showing up for her. Not in big, flashy ways, but in small, steady ones. He asked about her day. He listened to her answers. He made her laugh when she didn't think she could anymore. And slowly, something inside her began to melt. The walls she had built around her heart started to crack. She wasn't sure if it was love, but it was something warm, something safe. And that was more than she had felt in a long time. Still, she never told him the truth about her past. Not about the wedding. Not about Nia. Not about the day her life shattered. She kept it buried deep inside, afraid that if he knew, he would look at her differently. She didn't want him to feel sorry for her. She wanted him to love her for who she was now, not for what she had escaped. Idris never asked. He could sense there were things she didn't say, but he never pushed. He just showed up. Again and again. With gentle words, quiet strength, and eyes that saw her, really saw her. Not as the heartbroken girl she used to be, but as the woman she was becoming. Zawadi began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time, peace. Not the fake kind where you smile to hide the pain, but the real kind, where you feel safe enough to just breathe. They started spending more time together. Walks in the park. Simple dinners. Long talks that stretched late into the night. Zawadi didn't realize she was falling until one day, he didn't show up, and she felt like something was missing. When he walked in the next morning, carrying 2 cups of tea and an apology for being late, she smiled in a way she hadn't smiled in years. She still hadn't told him everything. But she started to believe that maybe she didn't have to. Because love, she realized, wasn't about dragging your past into the light. It was about building something new, something better. And with Idris, she wasn't the girl who had been left at the altar. She was just Zawadi, strong, kind, brave, and worthy of love. And even though she didn't say it out loud, her heart whispered it every time she looked at him, this is what healing feels like. 3 years later, Zawadi stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back at her. She had come so far from the broken-hearted girl who once packed a suitcase and left her whole life behind. Now, she stood tall, full of quiet strength, dressed in the most beautiful wedding gown she had ever seen. The lace was soft and delicate, made just for her. The diamonds on the veil sparkled like stars. Everything about her looked like a dream, but it wasn't a dream. It was real. And this time, it was her turn to smile. The wedding took place in one of the most luxurious venues in all of Africa. Every corner of the garden was decorated with white roses, gold chandeliers, and crystals that caught the sunlight perfectly. The aisle was lined with candles and petals, and guests were flown in from all over the world, powerful leaders, business tycoons, celebrities, and royalty. But even in the middle of such luxury, the most unforgettable thing was Zawadi herself. As the music began, everyone turned to see her. She walked slowly, each step confident, full of grace. The crowd couldn't stop staring. The cameras clicked. The whispers started. But none of it mattered. Because at the end of the aisle stood Idris, Africa's youngest billionaire, the man who saw her heart long before he saw her beauty. He stood there with tears in his eyes, completely in love, completely proud, and completely hers. Nia was in the crowd, sitting quietly near the back. She had heard the rumors, of course. Everyone had. But she didn't believe them, not until she saw it with her own eyes. Her sister, the one she once betrayed, now the center of the most talked about wedding on the continent. Nia looked at her husband, the same man she once stole from Zawadi, now jobless, bitter, and clearly out of place. He stared at the ground, ashamed. And for a moment, Nia realized what she had lost, and what Zawadi had become. Zawadi didn't even glance at them. Her eyes stayed on Idris, and her smile never faded. When she reached him, he held her hand like it was the most precious thing in the world. The vows they spoke were full of love, pain, and promise. They didn't just marry each other, they honored the journey that brought them here. The moment they were pronounced husband and wife, the guests rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even crying. It wasn't just a wedding. It was a moment of victory. A woman who had once been humiliated now stood in glory, not because of wealth or fame, but because she chose to rise instead of break. Photos from the wedding flooded social media. Headlines read, "From betrayal to billionaire bride." But Zawadi didn't care about the attention. She didn't care about proving anyone wrong. She had already won. Her heart was full. Her past was behind her. And her future? It began with love, and this time, it was hers to keep. The Grand Charity Gala in Nairobi was the event of the year. The city's finest had gathered, celebrities, business tycoons, politicians, and journalists, all dressed in their best, sipping champagne under golden chandeliers. It was a night full of cameras, laughter, and flashing lights. But no one could have guessed that the biggest moment of the night wouldn't come from the stage, but from a silent, powerful face-off between two sisters with a complicated past. Nia arrived early, hoping to blend in. She wore an old dress that had lost its shine, and her shoes didn't match. Her makeup was simple, but her eyes held stress and tiredness. She clung tightly to her husband's arm, the same man who once left Zawadi for her. But now, he had lost everything, his job, his charm, and the admiration he once enjoyed. The two of them quietly found a seat near the back, hoping to go unnoticed. But then the room changed. Zawadi arrived, and it was as if the entire air shifted. The music softened. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. She walked in with effortless elegance, wearing a long gown that sparkled with every step. Her hair was neatly pinned, her smile calm, and her presence stronger than ever. Beside her stood Idris, tall and confident, holding her hand proudly. Together, they looked like royalty. As Zawadi and Idris walked through the crowd, people turned to admire them. Some whispered, some took photos, but everyone noticed. And then, Nia saw her. Her eyes widened. Her heart began to race. For a moment, Nia didn't know whether to stand, wave, or hide. She chose to stand. Nia took a deep breath and walked toward Zawadi with a fake smile. Her husband stayed behind, clearly uncomfortable. "Zawadi," she said softly, trying to sound warm. "It's been so long." Zawadi turned slowly. Her eyes met Nia's, and for a brief second, the world stood still. But instead of anger, or pain, or even awkwardness, Zawadi just smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile that forgave. It was the kind that had already moved on. "You once called me nothing," Zawadi said, her voice clear and graceful. "Now even your shadow can't reach where I stand." The words were gentle, but they cut deep. Nia froze. Her smile faded. People nearby pretended not to watch, but everyone heard it. Nia's face turned red, and her hands trembled slightly. She had nothing to say, because the truth was already spoken. Zawadi didn't wait for a reply. She turned and walked away, her head held high, Idris proudly by her side. That was the end of it, no drama, no shouting, just dignity and truth. Later that night, photos of Zawadi at the gala went viral. But more than her dress or her husband, it was her calm strength that captured hearts across the continent. Because she didn't just show up, she showed growth. And in one quiet moment, she reminded the world that healing is power, and walking away with grace is the loudest victory of all. Zawadi never came back to prove anyone wrong. She didn't chase revenge, and she didn't waste time trying to make people regret how they treated her. Her success was quiet, powerful, and loud enough without her saying a word. After the fairy tale wedding and the headlines, she could have chosen to disappear into luxury. But Zawadi remembered what it felt like to be broken, alone, and forgotten. So instead of turning away, she turned her pain into purpose. She started a scholarship fund for young girls who had been abandoned, betrayed, or left behind, just like she once was. These weren't just donations. Zawadi built safe spaces, schools, and training programs. She gave girls a second chance, a voice, and a reason to believe in themselves again. And across the country, the name Zawadi began to mean more than just beauty or wealth. It became a symbol of strength. She visited villages where women had no hope, sat with them, listened to them, and told them they mattered. She showed them how to rise from the ashes, not by pretending the fire never happened, but by walking straight through it and coming out stronger. Little girls who once felt invisible now dreamed bigger because of her. Women who had been betrayed now held their heads higher. And Zawadi? She didn't need applause or attention. Her joy came from seeing others rise. Because in the end, her story wasn't just about healing her heart, it was about building a kingdom from every piece that once tried to break her.